push for simultaneous elections, or as the BJP is calling it, a one nation, one poll, has grown stronger. The BJP president, Amit Shah, has written a letter to the Election Commission pitching for simultaneous polls. What are the merits and demerits? Well, to get the other side of the story, we're speaking now with Praveen Chakravarty, who is chairperson, Data Analytics Department at the Congress. Of course, in his early avatar, before he joined the Congress party, he has worked in great detail on the statistics and the data behind simultaneous polls. So in that context as well, Praveen, happy to speak with you today on the topic of simultaneous elections. I want to start by asking you for your comment on the broad pitch that Amit Shah is making in his letter to the Chief Election Commissioner and to the Election Commission, in fact, where he talks about how the nation is always in election mode. He cites an example, the state of Maharashtra in 2016 and 17, where out of 365 days, there was the model code of conduct in place in 307 days in some part or the other of the state.
Okay. See, first we must start by recognizing that we are a federal nation. We are a federal nation with federal legislatures and local body elected representatives to local bodies. So we must first recognize that and accept that. If we accept that as a premise, this idea that there are elections constantly will perhaps be true in any part of the country. But why is that a problem? That's something actually to be proud about and cherished, because we are a truly representative democracy right down to local levels of government. So this notion that because there is a panchayat election in some village and a Vidhan Sabha election and a Lok Sabha election, and hence we must combine all these elections, sounds a little farcical actually, because that's the way all representative federal democracies work.
No, what's the problem if they're held together? It is not as if it takes away the right of the voter. Is the concern that the voter may get confused and not be able to differentiate whether she wants to vote a different party at the local level and different party at the state or the national level? What is the prime concern?
No. Let's not bring voter behavior into this yet. So the primary opposition point of view is that it takes away rights of local federal governments at the state level, elected bodies at the local, elected governments at the local body level. And what is that right? Let's say I'm an elected chief minister of a particular state, and let's say for some reason I can dissolve the assembly and call for fresh elections for whatever reason. The reasons could be valid, the reasons could be anything. Under Article 172, I have the powers to dissolve my assembly and call for fresh elections. That is today allowed, and that is truly a right that the state legislature enjoys. By forcing them to go to elections simultaneously with the center, why should we remove the rights of the states to dissolve assemblies and call for elections, but the center can keep the right? So it's an attack on federalism. It's an attack on federal powers. I think it's not so much about removing voting powers to people or any of that. It is about federal powers and state-central relationships. That's the most critical point. The secondary, what is the reason given for holding one elections? This reason of cost, it's too expensive. And that, I think, is in some sense a completely hollow argument. And let's look at the numbers here. According to the Prime Minister's speeches and the Election Commission figures and the Niti Aayog paper on this, it costs 4,000 crores for the Election Commission to run the 2014 election. They also go on to say it costs another 4,000 crores for all the state elections combined. That's 8,000 crores in a span of 5 years for center and state elections to all the 29 states, which works out to 1,500 crores per year. Is that really a big expense? We spend 30 lakh crores every year, center and states combined. That's 0.05%. So the cost argument is completely hollow, right? So then what is the other argument? That we are in permanent campaign mode and the model code of conduct leads to policy paralysis. Now tell me, in an era of cooperative federalism and more powers to the states, why should a model code of conduct for election in, say, West Bengal affect any project or development in, say, a state of Tamil Nadu? Why? I mean, what is the connection between a model code of conduct in West Bengal to any project in Tamil Nadu? So the model code of conduct argument is also farcical. So then what is the reason? The reason presumably is because there are two people that want to campaign throughout for every election, from local body elections right to the Lok Sabha elections. And because there are elections held disparately, their time is held up in campaigning for these elections. But let's not change the basic constitutional structure of the country for the sake of two people.
I want to come to the point you made about an attack on federalism. So in a lot of permutations and combinations that have been discussed and debated about what happens if a state assembly needs to be dissolved earlier, one option that has been put forth is that if a chief minister or a party wants to dissolve its government, they can go ahead and do that. But for the interim period, the gap period, that state would be under president's rule. And then the next election cycle would again sync with when the nation goes to elections. Is that a workable solution at all in your view?
But why? I mean, why come up with solutions like this when there is no problem in the first place? So if a state assembly gets dissolved and the state has to go in for fresh elections, so what is the problem there?
So, okay, let me give you some of the counters that Amit Shah has talked about in his letter. And one of them, where he talks about the model code of conduct, is his argument is that because of the model code of conduct and because parties know when the next election cycle will begin, they start announcing populist measures. And instead of focusing on policies that will help their states progress, they come down to announcing policies which would garner them more votes, which at the end of the day hampers development. Do you not think that there is some essence of truth in that argument? We do often see state governments pull out all the stops to try and win the next election without really a lot of focus on what long-term benefits those measures will give the state.
That sounds like an argument against electoral democracy itself. I mean, that's just bizarre, to argue that a certain incumbent government or political parties will behave in a certain manner for elections, and hence elections should not be held too often. I mean, doesn't that sound like an argument against electoral democracy in itself? So why have elections at all? So why don't we just have this long-term 30-year view for policy making and have somebody sit in Delhi and make that policies for the country? I mean, that just sounds completely ridiculous to me.
Let's come to voter behavior, because you have done some detailed work, Praveen, on how voters behave when they vote in simultaneous elections. And we do have that precedent in India. I think from 52 to 67, if I'm not mistaken, there were simultaneous elections. Is the voter behavior something that would truly concern opposition parties based on this data?
In 52 to 67, simultaneous elections were not by design, but they were by consequence. Because we became a republic at one day, and then we decided that we will hold elections every 5 years, and hence the cycle started. It broke naturally, again, not by design. So let's not conflate what happened between 52 to 67 and what we are trying to do now. Okay, so now there is a design for concurrent elections. Back then, it was consequential, right? So that's number one. The question about voter behavior, and see, that is purely empirical research work, and voter behavior, all I kind of argued, or showed rather, was that there is an impact on voter behavior when elections are held simultaneously versus when elections are held even 6 months apart. That was a matter of academic curiosity. I am not arguing or saying that that is a reason why we should not have concurrent elections or have concurrent elections. I think the voter behavior part is just external to this entire issue on hand. But I'm just, my research showed, which was interesting, I thought, and that's why I put out the finding, that when elections are held simultaneously, 77% of the voters tend to choose the same party for both the state assembly and the Lok Sabha. When elections are held even 6 months apart, this number drops to 61%. And I just thought this was an interesting finding on voter behavior using empirical research.
No, I get your point that you're not using this argument or this research to base any of your counter to the concept of simultaneous elections. But could this be playing into the push for simultaneous polls? Because let's come back to the current context of what we're seeing. We have 3 major states going to elections by the end of this year. There has been a lot of talk about advancing the Lok Sabha elections. We don't know what that's going, if that's going to happen. Would it, in your view, politically suit the BJP's purpose to have simultaneous elections?
That's conjecture on my part, Taman, and I'm not here to suggest that there is a political motive or it would politically suit the BJP or the Congress or any of that.
Not yet a politician,
I think the primary reason. Do you want me to be one? I think the primary reason for this entire discussion and debate is the fact that the campaigner-in-chief of the country for everything from a municipal election to a state election to a Lok Sabha election also happens to have the job of running the country and governing this $3 trillion economy, which he's perhaps finding it hard to do. My simple submission is, elections or no elections, he would anyway find that hard to do.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Praveen Chakravarty, for speaking with us today.
City Union Bank, trust in excellence since 1904. City Union Bank wishing you a happy Independence Day.
Dreamers, they're everywhere. You've met them, been to school with them, worked with them. They didn't seem different. Yet she's the one who surprised everybody. His crazy idea actually worked.
They are no different, they are you, when you take a chance on yourself.
These are the dreamers who found a way to run the engine of the world. These are the entrepreneurs